The day has come. It is time for us to talk about Transformers War for Cybertron EARTHRISE, the next part of the Netflix series of the War for Cybertron trilogy. So we're going to go through the 6 episodes. There's obviously going to be some spoilers. I'm not going to go through every little beaten path through it. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the notes that I put down and some of the interesting stuff to mention. And then I'll give kind of my final thoughts through it pretty much. For people that don't want to listen through this all, it was better than Siege. Obviously, Siege had a lot more going against it in that it had to build up a story and introduce us to characters, because there's, just as much as we have hardcore fans watching this, there is going to be a mainstream audience that will be engaging with this, so we have to be introduced to a whole bunch of characters with Siege, and that is a disadvantage for it. As it pertains to stuff like, let's say, the voice acting or just the overall kind of pace of communication, I guess is the best way to put it, it's still pretty rough. It's still pretty slow, but I'll get deeper into that as I go through it. So let's start with episode 1. So things that I noticed with episode 1 essentially is we get a little bit of a recap. There's going to be a lot of older footage from Siege being used over and over throughout the episodes. I don't know if it's to pad it out. I don't know if it's one of many budgetary things, but it seems to be something that's going to come up a lot. Just like, hey, remember what happened literally like 3 episodes ago? So for something that's a bingeable kind of format like that of a Netflix series, I always find that, using flashbacks and stuff like that are really not necessary. It's not something where you watched an episode and then a week later you're watching the next one and you kind of have to be reminded. I don't know. It's something that with this format, it's not necessary, but I also think I know why they did it. They needed to pad out the runtime, and that's kind of the thing with this series, is that I think the budget is always something that's going to be kind of holding it back. But that being said, episode 1, we're pretty much right where we left off. Alita is fighting the good fight, and Optimus is in his space adventure, kind of in paralyzed mode. Only stuff to really note is the character of Scrapface, which was one of the first Netflix War for Cybertron Siege toys from the first wave, who didn't really have any kind of an appearance in the Siege series. He plays quite a bit more predominant role in this one. One thing that I do like about the first episode is that we actually get, for the first time, a little bit of character development for Megatron, in that you could kind of see in him there's pity, it's not just straight up rage and destruction and doing what he wants. He actually wanted to see the sector and see the people there before he literally cuts the lights on them more than one way. It was interesting. There was almost a humanism to Megatron there, and I'll give credit to the series there being able to do that. Usually a lot of times we don't get that Megatron ever, and it's very, very nice to see that in animation as opposed to something that we've only been able to kind of enjoy in the comic book format, in the written form. So that's pretty cool. We also get a name drop and a somewhat cameo of Steeljaw. So I guess at some point and somewhere Blaster is around. We see Steeljaw just in cassette mode getting interrogated and shocked up. But that's a nice little touch. At least like, oh hey, here's Steeljaw, even though we didn't make it really an animation model for him. Here's just this block that we're going to say is Steeljaw. And the only other thing to just mention, it's like, oh hey, so Shockwave, he's behind the Nemesis project and creating the Nemesis, and so that's kind of cool. I could always imagine if there's anyone that would have been the one behind the greatest Decepticon ship of all time, it would probably be someone like Shockwave, who's a master engineer and stuff like that. So pretty cool. Aside from that, not much else really to point out in this episode. It really is just showing like where we left off. Elita 1 is now watching over the leftover character models that are available. The fact that she says that this is the last of the Autobots is like, oh man, really? Like, there's only like 4 Autobots, 5 if you count the interrogated Steeljaw left on Cybertron, or is it just the budget just doesn't lead to it? Speaking of which, tons of just reuses and repaints of stuff over and over. Reflector, aka refractor molds everywhere, Ironhide molds. It's just, there's just the same 12 molds all over the place. It's pretty rough, but again, episode 1, I'll let it slide, and we'll move into episode 2. So first thing to mention with episode 2, we get a name drop of the planet of Char, which would in the future be the Decepticon HQ for the season 3 Decepticons and Generation 1's original cartoon. So that's a nice little nod. Of course, we're introduced to the mercenaries. We knew this was coming, so we get Double Dealer, Bug Bite, Exhaust, the Coneheads. I've talked about it in my trailer reviews. Outside of Double Dealer being the new design, everyone else is just straight up repaints. The Coneheads, which we barely get a really good shot of, we only get like 1 or 2 really good shots of. It's pretty clear that they're just the Coneheads on all have this, like they have one modified Seeker body and they just share it among the 3 of them, as opposed to the Coneheads normally having each their own unique body types. And by the fact that we don't ever really get a good shot of the Coneheads, like a really good close-up shot, was probably a purposeful reason to kind of mask the fact that they aren't unique amongst each other. So that kind of sucks, but okay. So we're introduced to Decius, I think the name was. So we're introduced to a Quintesson judge named Decius. Kind of dark and morbid, I'll give it credit there, where we're first introduced to Quintessons actually questioning themselves. Usually it's always been, we've always felt that despite the fact that they had 6 heads, they kind of were all one. This one, there's this more unique kind of multiple personality disorder. And then the female counterpart of it, of Decius, the female face, cutting off, literally surgically removing the other faces as they scream in agony. Pretty dark stuff. I actually kind of dug that. Very interesting take on Quintessons. But not much else really to bring up when it comes to them. Just kind of the same old, yeah, we created you, but maybe we didn't create you. But then Decius was the, one of the faces of Decius, which was killed, was the one that gave the Cybertronians the freedom to fight back. And interesting backstory explanation there that was never covered in any previous fiction, outside of using little pieces here and there. So I appreciate that, at least. It builds that world. There's also mention of the Crystal City falling, so, at some point, I guess Omega Supreme and the Guardians were fighting, I guess, Devastator and the crew back on Cybertron, perhaps, maybe. We also get a name drop of Megatron talking about his past with Elita 1, calling her Ariel, so there's that kind of old school connection there, and Elita 1's past, I guess the old dock worker days, perhaps. The Dualcons of Skytread, he shows up again, so hey, he's still around. That's kind of cool. But otherwise, when this episode's over, we kind of see how small the mercenaries' role really was initially in this. They will be a thing later on. For episode 3, we have again another name drop. It's like, oh hey, there's the Nebulans. Like they're like, oh, there's a Nebulan space bridge. So maybe there's a planet of Nebulans. Maybe there's this. But of course, this all leads to, depending on what continuity Scorponok is involved in. Scorponok, Lord Zarek, originally Nebulan. But it's just the way that Scorponok was executed in this episode is kind of a shame. So they find a space bridge. It's a Nebulan, I guess, space station that was crossing through one. It got stuck halfway. It's never really explained 100% what happened. We find a imprisoned inside the space station Scorponok. Probably, it's never really explained too much. You have to listen to his rants and read in between the lines, but it's something similar to, I guess we could say, like a Rampage kind of character from Beast Wars, where it's a war prisoner that's been sealed off in a giant chamber. And now he's broken free and gone on a rampage, no pun intended. And again, he has that Grimlock kind of speech pattern. It's a very different take than the G1 Scorponok that we've had before, whether it be the Sunbow USA cartoon, which is just a scheming kind of working with Galvatron Nebulan human, if you will, that has a giant body, to the Japanese version that was a more Starscream, I want to lead the Decepticons, and then does lead the Decepticons kind of giant Titan character, to even the way that he was in the Marvel Comics, where a, you know, still pretty normal nobility kind of Nebulan character. This one, on top of all that, being much smaller than anticipated. I was expecting a huge Titan class city former. Instead, they go for something more in tune with, I guess we could say, the Marvel Comics counterpart that's a little smaller, more Power Master Optimus Prime sized, or even that of we could say like even the Energon character, you know, just larger than most Transformers, but not exactly a combiner or a Titan class kind of thing. So they go for something a lot smaller. Again, just kind of a ravaging, crazy rampage character swinging around while kind of dropping some backstory hints in its crazy Grimlockian kind of rants. And then like, oh, hey, you know, he knows the creators. He knows of Quintessons. There's stuff there, but it's not completely fleshed out 100%. Another thing, too, that I found bizarre, there's a character that kind of looks like Six Gun, but it's clearly the cog mold done in red. And I don't know if it's the same character or they have multiple of them, but it seems like he was killed twice. Like he got stabbed through the chest once, and then he got grabbed later on as if he was okay and then thrown into a wall. I don't know. Like there's a lot of those like weird repaint characters that just keep showing up. Same thing with the Quintesson episode prior to that. There was a whole bunch of Ironhides, just like a whole army of them. Not much to mention really there. We also get I don't know, maybe it's just my own personal, like, ooh, there was a red Mirage that was shown, a red repaint Mirage at one point that was in the medical bay of all the people getting repaired by Red Alert. And I was like, oh, that's cool, because, you know, Red Mirage was one of Ultra Magnus's original Japanese Diaclone pack-in figures. They did a Red Mirage, and I've always dug Formula One cars, so to see that Red Mirage is kind of cool. That has nothing to do with the episode. I just found that fascinating. I don't know if that was a mistake because they just needed to do millions of repaints, and they're like, hey, we haven't done the Mirage mold in red yet as a background character. Let's just do that. And I guess they inadvertently did a old Diaclone, Microman kind of homage without even knowing it. Not much else really to mention here. Not really much else. Again, it's just a lot of shooting and yelling and screaming and oh hey Scorponok, and when it's all said and done, Scorponok is no more. So one episode, one big build up, kind of gone. Titan class figure, that's that. Probably not going to see anything of him in the near future. I'm assuming that the place on the other side of that space bridge was the planet of Nebulos. That's what I'm going to assume. It's never established, but that's what I'm going to assume it is. Basing it off of kind of the geology, a little bit of the Marvel comics and stuff like that. Could be that. Episode 5 got me interested a little bit. Got me pretty interested primarily because we get a little bit more flesh out and backstory of Skylynx. Skylynx was one of those characters that when he appeared in season 3 of the Generation 1 cartoon, he was just dropped in our laps. And it was just like, oh, hey, he's arrogant. That's it, okay. This one, it's kind of interesting to see him and his early days fighting, wanting the matrix of leadership for his own arrogance. Alpha Trion banishing him to the dead zone, if you will, the dead universe as it's called. The only thing that kind of sucks about this episode is that it confirmed, like, oh, hey, something that I worried about, which was, oh, hey, we're going to show you the 2 other Optimus Prime repaint toys that we did, which was Nemesis Prime and the Dead Universe Optimus Prime. We're going to show them for about literally 1 second, like literally 1 second each, and that's it. And we're going to put them in the trailers. We're going to make you think that there's something here, but there's not really anything here. We saw, like, again, Nemesis Prime we saw for maybe a second and a half, and Dead Universe Optimus we saw for maybe a second and a half. So that kind of is, I don't know. I just found that kind of funny. And then another thing that was kind of disappointing was Galvatron was introduced. I dug that they gave it the old G1 homage, reformatting Galvatron intro, which was kind of cool. But he's introduced and he's just as quickly unintroduced and thrown away to us. Hopefully this will lead to seeing more of him in possibly the sequel series of Kingdom. But again, very, very little of Galvatron here, almost as much as we saw in the trailer, which is kind of sad. Like the trailer gave us maybe 50% of the footage and dialogue for Galvatron. So aside from the cool Skylinks kind of backstory and everything, and I dug Skylinks in this episode, I really did. Like, I think he was probably the most interesting thing about it. Everything else was kind of, unfortunate, kind of got my hopes up and that. Good stuff, though, was Galvatron when he leaves, he gives the golden disc, again, tying into what's going to probably be the story for the next series, figuring out the future, changing destinies, the golden disc cards, all of that kind of stuff that's with Kingdom. So kind of, tying the seeds for what's going to be used for the series afterwards, whatever they'll choose to use. The only thing else I want to mention is, God, like, at some point, Optimus Prime's voice goes from stoic to just, I'm yelling all the time, and it doesn't even sound like at some points I was like, what happened to the voice actor? Did he lose his voice and now he's just yelling all the time? It's not the Optimus I know. I understand you could argue that it's early days Optimus, but I mean, man, he is just yelling all the time. This is like Michael Bay Optimus, where it's just yelling, 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 yelling. No Cool Hand Luke, no John Wayne Optimus, just always angry, and so angry that breaking the Optimus Prime sounding voice to nah, it doesn't even sound like him anymore. To the point that it's one of these things where, sometimes Scott McNeil, when he was doing the voice for Silverbolt in Beast Wars, he would do such loud growls with Silverbolt that he'd be accidentally channeling like Dinobot. He'd be channeling another character. And it's kind of the same thing here where, because he's yelling so much, he's just falling out of the character that he's supposed to be voice acting, this actor. And at the end of the day, I don't know. I wasn't digging Optimus's voice in the second half of this. There was just too much. It's like, again, I almost felt like he lost his voice halfway through the series and he had to just run with the yelling to kind of stay, I guess, relevant. And then we have the last episode. Not much really to talk about there. It's just more like, hey, we're on multiple ships. There's all kinds of stakes here. Gotta look out, guys. Oh no, like we gotta get off this ship. We're hovering over this mysterious planet. Oh, we have tractor beam. G1 kind of nods to More Meets the Eye Parts 1, but then we got the third ship and Double Dealer and the crew, they're actually, betraying them, but no, it's actually that one Quintesson, and that one Quintesson is going to get, killed, and that, Cog kind of goes out like a hero, even though he kind of gets killed, and there's stuff there that if they had more time to tell a story, it would lead more of an impact. Imagine if there was like a whole episode just building up Cog as a character, doubting himself, telling that story, and then leading to his self-sacrifice. But because everything happens here so rapid fire that you don't have time to connect with the characters or like mourn them, if you will. And again, that's the issue with having a 6-episode series, is you can't build up these characters before you snuff them out. So when characters die, it's like, man, that kind of sucks. You know what I mean? So someone like Cog, while it should have been seen as a heroic kind of moment and stuff like that, because it's so quick, it's so out of nowhere, and because we just rarely had much time with that character, it's kind of like, oh, that's a shame. Kind of in the same way that how we lost Skylinks. Skylinks, at least we had just enough time to develop him as a character before he died. And assuming he dies, assuming that he gets, completely eviscerated there. But the point is that, at least we had enough time with him to kind of feel bad about his self-sacrifice, where it was kind of quick. And there wasn't much else to really touch on with that. lo and behold, the ships, they're going to crash on Earth. And we end with probably, and it's sad because so many people were saying that the past 6 episodes of Earthrise were kind of and then like the last 10 seconds got them excited, which says so much about how they've been pacing all of this and people's connection to it. So everything crashes on Earth, and then we see a Velociraptor, and it's kind of a double like nod because obviously it's supposed to be Dinobot from the Predacons, but it also kind of throws back to the Beast Wars packaging where you have the Velociraptor eye, and it pretty much, the camera goes hard onto that eye. So you first get that Beast Wars packaging kind of thing going on, and then of course the eye ends up being mechanical, which suggests that it is Dinobot. So pretty cool stuff. And then of course that's going to lead us into what'll probably be Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom. At least we got the Dinobot character model, at least the Raptor mode. We didn't get to see much of anything in terms of new designs, like Double Dealer. We got to see just his robot mode. We didn't really get to see the alt modes, so that was kind of meh. Same thing, all the other mercenaries didn't transform. At least to my knowledge, I didn't see them transform. So we don't get to see those character models either. So everything is done on, like, you have all the mercenaries. All of them were more or less repaint retools or just straight up repaints. And they don't transform, so they saved on character models there. Everything was done really on the low budget. I swear, like, if you lined up all the voices of all the characters we were introduced, with the exception of maybe Bugbite and the Quintessons, and of course Scorponok, everyone just kind of sounds the same. Like, there was nothing that was like unique or standing out. And again, voice acting seems to be the biggest weakness here. I said this last time with Siege. I don't know if this series was animated for the Japanese market first, and then we're dubbing over a Japanese market thing. I don't know if this was just animated and they're just trying to lip match for both markets. I don't know what is going on, but it's clearly the weakness of a studio booth singular style of voice acting where you can't really play off your other actors. But and that's always been a weakness for anime and stuff like that too when it's dubbed. But sometimes it works for anime because they get really talented voice actors that could make chicken soup out of chicken. And the problem is here is, again, I don't want to knock the voice actors, but it's what they have to work with, but it's so slow, everything. And everyone is told to be grimace and unhappy. And even when you have a character that's supposed to be a little more upbeat, he's only a little more upbeat by talking faster. Like if he's a more upbeat character, it's not because he's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" It's more just he talks a little faster than the other characters. So it's kind of the same as before. It's the same as before with, again, a little nuggets put in between episodes that just keep the hardcore fans going, "Oh, hey, that. Okay." Probably the highlight for everything for me over the past 6 episodes was something that, I guess maybe because it wasn't given to me 100% in the trailers and the build-up, I looked, Skylink's episode 5 was probably the most enjoyable, probably because it gave a little more backstory to a character that we didn't know 100% about through all different fiction, added to the fact that there was a little more character development with him, so that made it interesting as opposed to everyone else that gets little to no character development. Even Galvatron's kind of here just to leave. And not that we need character development for Galvatron, but considering how that was such a big hook of the trailer, and he's just literally 50% of the episode that he appeared in, he's there, and 50% of that we already saw of the footage and lines were from the trailer. So it was like, wow, it wasn't really used that much. Scorponok, again, I don't want to say he was mishandled, but I get a feeling maybe they're going to lead a way that he could come back in some kind of future, although probably not. But kind of, I don't know. Again, I give it like a high 6, low 7 kind of out of 10 here. It's really, I get what this is for. This is for the binge Netflix mainstream audience. and their budget really kind of paints them into a corner of a story they could tell. But it's something where if I was put in a situation where I had a very limited amount of characters I could work with, or I had a very limited amount of scenery or stuff like that, I think I'd be telling a very different story. I wouldn't be telling the grand giant war stories of early days Cybertron and stuff like that. And I understand that Hasbro's mandating the direction of the stories being told, and they're giving them literally these limited parts to tell that story, but it's just leading to, unfortunately, a product that could be better in a better environment, but it just really isn't. Where it's sad to say that, like, even something like Cyberverse in its 10-minute format seems to have a grander environment, even though Cyberverse also has a lot of army builders and repaints and stuff like that. They just made more characters. There was just a lot more characters, and gave characters a lot more time to grow and flesh out, even in that 10-minute format, which is crazy when you think about it. So it's a shame that our much more mature Transformer series is not trying to be mature and develop its characters. It's a lot of grim story talk, grim voice acting, some kind of action piece of shoot, 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 shoot. Oh, we got to shoot, 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 shoot. Someone dies just to remind us that, oh, by the way, this is some serious stuff. Or someone gets impaled, or someone gets crushed or killed, just to remind us that it's serious business. And then more grim voice acting, and then hard cut to credits, and then the next episode. Peppered in across all the episodes, using footage from Siege to just remind us what we were watching before, to kind of pad out the runtime. Again, there's good, there's bad. My hopes for Kingdom, and I really have high hopes for this, and it's unfortunately, for it to be what I hope, it's going to have to change what has been being done these past two parts of the trilogy. If you're going to be in Earth, that means you're going to be introducing a ton of new character models, a ton of them. Hopefully it's not just like, oh, hey, we're on Earth, and you're going to have Primal, Dinobot, Megatron, the Galvatron now that were introduced, Beast Wars Megatron. It's like, that's already like 5 or 6 character models more than we've been getting. And not to mention, because it's Beast Wars, you're going to want to see those alt modes, because the alt modes are just as important as the robot modes in terms of character. And considering how they gave us new characters in this part 2, and none of them really transformed, including Galvatron even, and they did it in a way that it saved them budget, I really worry how they're going to go into Kingdom. I think a lot of us are expecting the Beast Wars crew to be there, and they're all transforming, and they're all going to be there. And the Beast Wars crew being such a colorful character and characters and a crew, and the way the voice acting is done up to this point, this series would have to really 180 what it's been doing up to this point, in terms of budget, in terms of how many character models are given, in terms of environment, in terms of voice acting, in terms of character development. In order to do all of that, to even give us half of what we're going to expect from a Beast Wars environment, is going to be a really difficult mountain to climb. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will 180 completely. But it really feels like we just got more of the same, with little, oh, hey, that's kind of cool. Oh, hey, that's kind of cool. Oh, there's that little origin story. Oh, okay, Alita, Ariel. Oh, yeah, Skylink's, backstory. Oh, Crystal City. Again, something that any individual who is writing the series could have went onto Wikipedia, okay, I got Omega Supreme. What do we got here? Oh, it mentions a Crystal City. Okay. Like it's just the little fan nods here and there from the backstories of characters throughout different lore that could be pulled up quickly. But it's not some deep cut stuff. It's really just kind of page 1, first paragraph kind of stuff, as I like to call it, on any Wikipedia. But I don't know. I don't want to sound like a downer. I know that when episode 6 finished, I was like, okay, cool, Dinobot. And then I kind of got up and went, that kind of flowed extremely quickly. 6 episodes just kind of breezed by, and I didn't really feel like much got accomplished. I didn't like, outside of like Skylinks, everything else was kind of like meh. The Galvatron thing was kind of, it hit the water like a pebble instead of like a rock. So we shall see. We shall see. Again, the Golden Disc thing is now at least in play. We're on Earth now. Beast Wars is starting. Let's hope that this 180s in terms of production and everything like that, maybe they'll take more time, even though people probably wouldn't like that, and it'll probably miss the opportunity of being synergy with what's on the store shelves, because in January, Kingdom will officially be out. Obviously, it's been breaking street dates as of recently, and people have been finding it in retail, but let's hope that we have a series at least in time for when at least some of Kingdom's product is out there. Obviously, we're going to have stuff like in the previous series in Siege, we had our Commander class toy of Jetfire, and we had our Titan class toy in Omega Supreme. In this one, we had our Titan class also with Scorponok, and our Commander class in Skylinks. In this one here, with Kingdom coming forward, obviously we're going to have the Arc, and we're going to have the rumored Commander class, which I guess was Rodimus Prime. Don't quote me on this, because that could be changed. But so those two will probably be shown in it also at some point. So to have the series ready and teased this early when we don't even know those two things officially, and I use air quotes here, officially, we'll have something. We'll have something. But again, I wasn't feeling it too much. Again, high 6, low 7. I'll give it a low 7, I guess, just to say that there's a group of people that will enjoy this, but I think that there's a lot of other Transformers media that you could consume that if you did consume it prior to that, it would probably change your opinion of this, and you'd realize that there's a lot of other really good stuff out there. Even in limited formats, comic book stuff and everything like that, there was only 4 issues or 3 issues. There's a way to tell a story even when you have a limited budget and a limited cast, and I really don't think this was the way to go about it, but it's a show, it's passable, and it will find its audience that will enjoy it. So let me know what you think. I know it might come off a little harsh, but I mean, I just kind of felt it was more of the same like the last one. And I just really hope that going into Kingdom, it'll be something really different than what we've seen up to this point.